Everything we thought we knew about Ghost and Tommy is about to be rewritten. The secrets behind their brotherhood, their first blood, and the moment that pushed them toward Kanan are finally coming to light. Power Origins Episode 1 is not just another spin-off, it is the missing puzzle piece that explains why Ghost became Ghost and why Tommy was never meant to survive quietly. And now the trailer details and release timeline have revealed something far bigger than any of us expected. Power Origins. Episode 1 begins at a place we have never truly seen before, a world where Ghost is not feared, not respected, and not even known. James St. Patrick starts this story as a kid with dreams, a sharp mind, and a future that still feels clean. Unlike the Ghost we remember, this James still believes that intelligence and hard work can keep him safe, and that belief is exactly what makes Episode 1 so heartbreaking. We learn very early that James's childhood is built around his father, a disciplined man who owns a nightclub and believes in running things the right way. This is where James first learns about power, control, and respect, not from drugs, but from watching how his father manages people. These early moments quietly explain something huge. Ghost's obsession with legitimacy did not come from nowhere. It was planted long before the streets ever touched him. But Episode 1 wastes no time reminding us that in the Power universe, innocence never lasts. One decision changes everything. James's father attempts to stand up to the drug dealers poisoning his neighborhood, and that single act of courage becomes a death sentence. His murder is not loud or dramatic, it is cold, fast, and unforgiving. And in that moment, the version of James who believed in rules dies with him. After his father's death, James is pushed into a fragile family situation under the care of his uncle and grandmother. At first it feels like safety, but the cracks quickly begin to show. His grandmother's declining mental health creates instability, fear, and emotional chaos, forcing James to grow up faster than any child should. Episode 1 makes it painfully clear that James does not leave his family because he wants to, but because survival leaves him no choice. This is where fate steps in. James crosses paths with Tommy Egan in the most unexpected way, during a moment of cruelty that defines both of them. Tommy is being targeted, isolated, and humiliated simply for being different. James intervenes without hesitation, and that single act of loyalty becomes the foundation of the most dangerous brotherhood in Power history. This is not friendship built on convenience. This is connection born from shared pain. As the episode unfolds, we watch James and Tommy drift deeper into the streets, not because they crave violence, but because the streets give them something they cannot find anywhere else: control. They start small, learning corners, watching people, and figuring out how money really moves. Episode 1 shows us that Ghost's brilliance was never accidental. Even at a young age, James is already thinking 3 steps ahead. Tommy's home life adds fuel to the fire. His mother, Kate Egan, is exactly what we feared she would be: manipulative, unpredictable, and deeply damaging. The chaos inside Tommy's house pushes both boys further away from anything that resembles normal life. The streets become their classroom, and every mistake becomes a lesson paid for in blood or fear. And just when James and Tommy believe they are invisible, someone notices them. 2 names begin to circle their world. Names that carry weight, fear, and legacy. Kanan Stark is watching, and somewhere in the shadows, Breeze may already be pulling strings. Episode 1 carefully builds this tension, making it clear that their discovery is not an opportunity, it is a trap disguised as mentorship. By the time the episode reaches its final moments, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. James and Tommy are standing at the edge of a life that will never let them go. The choices they make next will not just define their future, they will shape the entire Power universe as we know it. This is where the idea of Ghost truly begins to form, even if the name has not been spoken yet. James starts moving in ways that keep him off the radar. He avoids unnecessary attention. He lets others take credit. He solves problems without leaving traces. Episode 1 subtly shows us that Ghost was never created in a single moment. It was built choice by choice. At the same time, we see James struggling internally with the life he is stepping into. His father's values still echo in his mind, clashing violently with the reality of what he is becoming. There are moments where he almost pulls back, moments where the weight of his choices hits him hard. But every time he hesitates, the streets remind him that weakness has a price. Meanwhile, pressure from law enforcement begins to creep in. We are introduced to detectives who do not underestimate the streets and do not rely on luck. They observe patterns, follow instincts, and slowly close in on the growing network Kanan is building. James notices this before anyone else, realizing that the game is already changing. The walls are not closing in yet, but they will. One of the most important developments in this section is James understanding that loyalty and power are not the same thing. He sees firsthand how quickly loyalty can be tested and how easily people flip when fear enters the equation. This knowledge hardens him. It forces him to think not just about today, but about how to stay untouchable tomorrow. By the end of Section 3, James makes a decision that quietly seals his path forward. He chooses strategy over emotion, silence over noise, control over chaos. And while no one around him fully realizes it yet, James St. Patrick is no longer just Kanan's protege, he is becoming something else entirely. And that leaves us with a chilling realization: if this is Ghost before the name exists, what happens when the world finally gives him one? Continuing directly from Section 3, no repetition, same voice, same tension, and pushing the story closer to its breaking point. Here is Section 4 only. As Episode 1 moves deeper, the story shifts from survival to consequence. The streets are no longer just shaping James and Tommy's future, they are testing their limits. New people enter their world, and with them come emotions that cannot be controlled as easily as money or fear. This is where the game becomes dangerous in ways neither of them fully understands yet. Tommy begins building a life that exists outside of the streets, and for the first time we see him genuinely care about something that is not violence or loyalty. His relationship with Jill Wexler brings balance into his chaos. She is smart, confident, and unafraid to challenge him. Episode 1 makes it clear that Jill sees through Tommy's tough exterior and recognizes the damaged person underneath. But love in the power universe is never safe. It is leverage waiting to be used. James, meanwhile, keeps his emotional walls high. Even when the possibility of something real appears, he stays distant. He understands something Tommy does not yet fully grasp. Attachment creates vulnerability. James chooses ambition over connection, control over comfort, and that choice slowly begins to separate the two friends in subtle but powerful ways. Kanan senses this shift immediately. He understands that emotions are the fastest way to weaken soldiers or turn them into weapons. He pushes situations that test loyalty, forcing James and Tommy to choose between personal feelings and the rules of the street. Every decision they make tightens the grip Kanan has on them. The episode also deepens the presence of law enforcement. Detectives begin connecting dots, noticing patterns that should not exist. Someone is moving too cleanly. Money is flowing too smoothly. James realizes that being invisible requires more than intelligence. It requires sacrifice. And those sacrifices are starting to pile up. Tension reaches a breaking point when James is forced to make a choice that affects someone close to him. The episode does not frame this moment as dramatic or loud. It is quiet, cold, and devastating. And that is what makes it terrifying. This is the moment where James proves, even to himself, that there are lines he is now willing to cross. Tommy sees the result, but not the full truth. And that gap in understanding plants the first real fracture in their brotherhood. They are still loyal, still united. But something has changed. Trust is no longer unconditional, it is calculated. Episode 1 does not rush the moment James and Tommy officially step into Kanan's world, and that patience makes the impact even heavier. By the time Kanan Stark finally appears in their lives, it feels less like a meeting and more like destiny catching up with them. Kanan does not approach them with warmth or promises, he studies them. He watches how they move, how they talk, and most importantly, how they react under pressure. And right away, he sees something different in James. While Tommy is loud, impulsive, and driven by emotion, James is calm, observant, and calculating. Episode 1 makes it clear that Kanan notices this contrast instantly. He does not test them with words. He tests them with silence. He puts them in situations where fear should take over, just to see who hesitates. And James never does. This is the first time we truly understand why Kanan later trusts Ghost with power that others never touch. As James and Tommy begin running small tasks, the streets start to feel different. This is no longer about surviving day to day. This is about structure, hierarchy, and rules that come with deadly consequences. Kanan introduces them to the idea that loyalty is more valuable than money, but also far more dangerous. One wrong move does not get corrected. It gets erased. This is also where the shadow of Breeze begins to loom larger, even without full confirmation of his presence. Episode 1 plants subtle clues that someone else is shaping the chessboard behind the scenes. Decisions are made that Kanan enforces but does not fully own. And James, even at this early stage, begins to sense that power in this world is never as simple as it looks. At the same time, the episode expands the emotional distance between James and the life he once had. School becomes optional. Dreams of college begin to fade. The pain of his father's death no longer feels fresh. It feels weaponized. James is no longer just reacting to loss. He is learning how to turn it into fuel. This is where the transformation truly starts. Tommy, on the other hand, embraces the chaos. The streets give him validation he has never felt at home. Violence feels natural to him, almost comforting. Episode 1 makes it clear that while James is becoming strategic, Tommy is becoming fearless, and that difference will one day tear the world apart. But for now, it binds them together, and Kanan begins pushing them harder, testing not just their skills, but their morals. He puts them in situations where someone has to suffer for them to succeed. And the most unsettling part is not that they comply, it is how quickly they stop questioning it. This is the exact moment where innocence finally disappears. By the end of Section 2, James earns something far more dangerous than respect. He earns Kanan's attention, not as a soldier, but as a future leader. And once that happens, there is no turning back, because in Kanan's world, potential is not protected. It is exploited. The episode quietly makes one thing terrifyingly clear. The streets are no longer shaping Ghost. Ghost is learning how to shape the streets, and that leads to the most chilling question yet. When James finally realizes he is being molded into something darker, will he fight it, or will he embrace the name that history is waiting to give him? Continuing directly from Section 2, no repetition, same tone, same suspense-driven flow. Here is Section 3 only. By the time Episode 1 reaches this phase, something inside James Street Patrick has already shifted. He is no longer just learning the streets. He is studying them. Every move Kanan makes, every order that comes down the line, James watches carefully, not just to obey, but to understand why. This is the stage where James stops thinking like a kid trying to survive and starts thinking like someone who wants control. Kanan begins giving James responsibilities that feel small on the surface but carry serious consequences. Handling people, managing money, fixing problems before they grow too big. And each time, James handles it quietly, efficiently, and without drawing attention. Episode 1 makes a powerful point here. James is not the strongest or the loudest, but he is already becoming the most dangerous. Tommy notices the change too. While he still trusts James more than anyone, there is a growing awareness that his best friend is evolving in a different direction. Tommy thrives on action, confrontation, and raw emotion. James thrives on patience, planning, and invisibility. Together, they are unstoppable, but that balance feels fragile, like something that could break at any moment. As Episode 1 approaches its final stretch, the tension that has been building quietly explodes into clarity. James and Tommy are no longer standing on the edge of the game, they are fully inside it. Every move they make now carries weight, and every decision has consequences that cannot be undone. This is the moment where the episode stops setting the stage and starts drawing the lines that will define the rest of the season. Kanan makes it clear that trust is earned through action, not words. He puts James and Tommy in a situation where failure is not an option and mercy is not expected. The task itself is simple, but the message behind it is brutal. Hesitation equals weakness. Episode 1 forces both of them to confront who they really are when no one is watching and no one is coming to save them. James handles the situation with the same calm precision we have seen growing throughout the episode. He anticipates outcomes, he controls the variables, and most importantly, he removes emotion from the equation. This is the exact moment where Kanan stops seeing James as a kid and starts seeing him as an asset, someone who could one day rival the very men he answers to. Tommy, however, feels the weight of what they have done more immediately. He does not regret loyalty, but he struggles with the cost. Episode 1 shows us that Tommy's strength has always been his heart, but that same heart will one day be used against him. The streets reward James's detachment, but they punish Tommy's humanity. Law enforcement closes in closer than ever before, creating a sense that this life is already beginning to consume itself. James notices signs others miss: loose talk, careless movement, patterns forming too early. He understands something terrifying. The game they have entered does not allow for mistakes, only replacements. In the final moments of the episode, James stands alone, reflecting on how far he has already traveled from the boy he used to be. His father's voice feels distant now, almost unreal. What remains is clarity. Power does not come from being seen, it comes from being untouchable. And James knows exactly which path he is choosing. Episode 1 ends without explosions or chaos, but with something far more unsettling: certainty. The certainty that James St. Patrick will never go back. The certainty that Ghost is no longer a future version of him. It is already forming, and as the screen fades, one question lingers heavier than all the rest. If this is only the beginning, how dark will Ghost become once the world finally learns his name? By the time episode 1 ends, it becomes clear that Power Origins is not interested in nostalgia, it is interested in consequences. The final moments do not just close a chapter, they quietly launch a war that will stretch across the entire season. James and Tommy may believe they have survived their first real test, but in reality, they have only proven that they are worth watching. Kanan's interest in James deepens, and that attention comes with danger. He begins positioning James closer to the core of his operation, exposing him to conversations and decisions that are never meant for newcomers. Episode 1 subtly shows that Kanan is not just training James, he is measuring him, testing how far he can be pushed before he breaks, or worse, before he starts pushing back. Tommy, meanwhile, starts to feel the shift without fully understanding it. He senses that James is being pulled into something bigger, something darker. Their conversations change, their silence grows longer, and for the first time, Tommy is not sure if they are walking the same path or if they are just walking side by side for now. Outside, pressure continues to build. Law enforcement is no longer chasing rumors, they are following patterns. Names are being written down, faces are being remembered. Episode 1 plants the idea that the clock has already started ticking, even if the characters do not hear it yet. The streets may feel wide open, but the exits are slowly disappearing. We also begin to understand that Power Origins is setting up